The last human. The chamber was vast and cold, built from crystalline alloys that hummed with ancient power. 17 species sat in elevated pods arranged in a perfect circle, their forms illuminated by the pale blue light that radiated from the walls. At the center of this circle stood a solitary figure, bound by electromagnetic restraints that crackled softly with each shallow breath he took. Ethan Reed had not seen another human being in 4 years. The silence in the chamber was absolute, broken only by the subtle hiss of atmospheric processors maintaining the varied breathing requirements of the assembled council members. Ethan could feel their eyes on him, each gaze carrying its own unique weight of curiosity, disgust, or fear. He kept his head down, dark hair falling across his face, hands clasped before him in the energy field that held him immobile from the waist down. Subject designation Ethan Reed, a voice boomed through the chamber, translated instantly into the neural implant they had forced into his skull during capture. The speaker was Counselor Vra, a towering Keprian whose exoskeleton gleamed like polished obsidian. You stand accused of the unprovoked destruction of the patrol vessel Harmonious Dawn, resulting in the deaths of 47 crew members. How do you answer? Ethan raised his head slowly, meeting the counselor's compound eyes. It was self-defense, he said quietly, his voice hoarse from weeks without proper conversation. They fired first. A ripple of movement passed through the council. Several members leaned forward in their pods, while others recoiled slightly. Ethan had learned enough about galactic body language during his time as a salvager to recognize discomfort when he saw it. Self-defense. This came from Counselor Mira, a Valesian whose translucent skin pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that Ethan had come to associate with contempt. A human claims self-defense. How quaint. How predictable. Her tendrils writhed with agitation. Your species claimed self-defense when they burned 3 colony worlds during the expansion wars. They claimed self-defense when they deployed biological weapons against civilian populations. They always claimed self-defense. That was 200 years ago, Ethan said, forcing himself to keep his voice level. I wasn't even born. And we believed your kind extinct, interjected Counselor Thane, a reptilian saurian whose golden eyes fixed on Ethan with unsettling intensity. For 70 years, we have operated under the assumption that humanity destroyed itself in the final stages of their civil war. Yet here you stand, impossibly alive, impossibly violent. Tell me, human, where have your people been hiding? Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. Hiding? He shook his head slowly. We're not hiding. We're gone. I'm the last one I know of. My colony was on the edge of the frontier rim, established by refugees who wanted nothing to do with the wars. By the time I was old enough to understand what had happened, Earth was already dead, and the core human worlds were ruins. Convenient, Mira hissed. A lone survivor with no witnesses, no proof, no accountability. The restraints around Ethan's wrists tightened automatically, responding to the subtle increase in his heart rate. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to push down the anger that threatened to surface. Getting emotional would only confirm their prejudices. They already saw him as a primitive, an animal barely in control of its own impulses. But as Ethan scanned the faces of the council, something else caught his attention. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, a flicker of movement in the shadows beyond the transparent dome that enclosed the chamber. The public gallery was supposed to be empty during trials of this nature, yet Ethan could have sworn he saw something shift in the darkness between 2 support columns. His pulse quickened, but not from anger this time. Counselor Vra was speaking again, listing charges and historical precedents, but Ethan found his focus drifting. That movement in the shadows, it wasn't right. The way it had shifted, so careful, so deliberate. He had spent years as a salvager navigating derelict ships and abandoned stations, learning to spot the things that didn't belong, the anomalies that meant danger. This was danger. His eyes tracked across the gallery, searching for another glimpse of whatever he had seen. The other counselors continued their debate, unaware. Thane was arguing for immediate execution, citing the risk of allowing even a single human to survive. Mira supported this motion, her bioluminescence flaring with vindictive satisfaction. Others argued for study, for interrogation, for using Ethan as a means to locate any other surviving human settlements. No one was watching the shadows. There. Another movement, this time closer to Counselor Vra's pod. Something small and sleek, hugging the support beam with an unnatural stillness that only something mechanical could achieve. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. A drone. An assassination drone, if he had to guess, probably equipped with molecular disruptors or neural toxins. The kind of weapon that would be nearly impossible to trace back to its operator. Someone was here to kill the Council. Ethan's mind raced through the implications. If the Council died while he was standing trial, he would be blamed. The last human, murdering the Galactic Council in a final act of species-wide vengeance. It would cement every prejudice, every fear, every reason the galaxy had convinced itself that humanity deserved extinction. He had to warn them. Counselors, Ethan said, interrupting Mira mid-sentence. There's something in the gallery. Upper left quadrant, near the support. Silence. Vra's voice cracked like thunder through the chamber. You will speak only when addressed, human. But there's a... The restraints tightened further, cutting off his words with a sharp jolt of pain that made his muscles seize. Ethan gasped, forcing himself to stay upright despite the waves of electric agony radiating through his nervous system. In the gallery, the drone moved again, positioning itself with calculated precision. And something inside Ethan Reed, something that had been sleeping for his entire life, something carved into his DNA through millions of years of surviving on a death world, began to wake up. His pupils dilated. His hearing sharpened. Time seemed to slow as adrenaline flooded his system, but this was different from normal fear responses. This was deeper, older, more focused. Every muscle in his body tensed with purpose, his mind clearing of everything except the immediate threat and the calculations needed to stop it. Predator mode. The Council continued their debate, oblivious to the danger and unaware that the frightened prisoner before them was transforming into something they had only read about in their most terrifying historical archives. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat now, steady and powerful, could smell the various atmospheric mixtures in the chamber, could sense the minute vibrations of the drone as it charged its weapons systems. 15 meters away. Targeting Counselor Vra. Charge cycle at 60%. He had maybe 20 seconds before it fired. His hands moved within the restraints, testing the electromagnetic bonds with newfound precision. The energy field was designed to hold someone thrashing in panic, not someone working with calm, methodical purpose. Ethan twisted his right wrist slowly, feeling for the weak point where the field generators created interference patterns. The human grows restless, Thane observed, his golden eyes narrowing. Perhaps we should increase the restraint level. Or perhaps we should simply be done with this, Mira suggested. I move for summary judgment. The evidence is clear, the precedent established. Why waste more time on a relic of a failed species? Counselor Oren, a Lemurian whose energy form flickered with uncertainty, raised a tentative objection. The law requires full deliberation. Even for a human. The law was written for civilized beings, Mira countered. Not for apex predators who... The drone's charge cycle hit 80%. 10 seconds. Ethan found the weak point in the restraints. The electromagnetic field created a resonance frequency when it interfaced with the metal cuffs around his wrists. If he could just generate enough kinetic force at the right angle, he could disrupt the field long enough to break free. But that would trigger every alarm in the facility and likely result in his immediate execution. 8 seconds. He looked up at the Council, these beings who had already decided he was guilty, who saw him as nothing more than a monster from their history books. He could let the drone fire. Let Vra die. In the chaos that followed, he might even escape. 6 seconds. But that wasn't who Ethan Reed was. Despite everything they believed about humanity, despite every reason he had to let them suffer the consequences of their own blind arrogance, he couldn't watch innocent beings die when he had the power to stop it. 4 seconds. "I'm sorry," he whispered, more to himself than to them. "I'm sorry for what I'm about to do." 2 seconds. Ethan Reed exploded into motion. The apex awakens. The electromagnetic restraints shattered with a sound like breaking glass amplified through a cathedral. Ethan didn't remember the exact sequence of movements, his body operated on pure instinct now, every muscle fiber working in perfect synchronization. He launched himself upward, his legs coiling and releasing with explosive force that carried him 12 feet into the air toward Counselor Vrya's pod. The chamber erupted in chaos. Alarms screamed their warnings a half-second too late. Security drones dropped from concealed ports in the ceiling, weapons already charging. The counselors scattered in their pods, some activating personal shield systems, others simply freezing in shock. Vra himself reared back, mandibles spread wide in either challenge or fear. Ethan couldn't tell which and didn't care. The assassination drone fired. A beam of concentrated molecular disruptor energy lanced through the space where Vrya's central nervous cluster had been positioned 0.3 of a second earlier. The beam would have killed him instantly, disintegrating his biological matter at the cellular level. Instead, it struck the reinforced backing of his pod, leaving a perfectly circular hole that hissed and smoked. Ethan's shoulder collided with Vrya's thorax, his arms wrapping around the Keprian's exoskeleton as they both tumbled from the pod. They hit the chamber floor hard, Ethan absorbing most of the impact and rolling to place himself between the counselor and the assassin's line of fire. His back screamed in protest, but the pain felt distant, muted by the flood of biochemicals saturating his system. "Stay down!" Ethan shouted, his voice raw with urgency. Vra struggled beneath him, attempting to push the human away with surprising strength. Treachery. Murder. The human attacks. "Shut up and look up." Ethan snarled, pointing at the gallery where the assassination drone was repositioning for another shot. For a moment, Vrya's compound eyes followed the gesture. Ethan felt the exact instant when the counselor's perception shifted, when he saw the sleek mechanical killer and understood what had actually just happened. The security drones opened fire. Plasma bolts and neural disruptor pulses filled the air around Ethan, most aimed at him, some tracking toward the assassination drone as the automated security systems finally registered the genuine threat. Ethan moved on pure reflex, his enhanced awareness allowing him to plot trajectories and predict firing patterns with disturbing accuracy. He dragged Vra behind a support column as a plasma bolt scorched the floor where they'd been lying. The Keprian was making a strange clicking sound that Ethan's translator implant rendered as shocked profanity in 17 different languages. "There's more than one," Ethan said, his eyes scanning the gallery even as he processed the movements of every council member, every security drone, every shadow that seemed slightly wrong. "At least 3, maybe 4. They're using the security response as cover." "How can you possibly," Vra began, but Ethan was already moving again. Another assassination drone had dropped from a concealed position above Counselor Myra's pod. This one was closer, and it wasn't bothering with charged shots. It deployed a cloud of molecular razors, microscopic cutting edges that would shred organic tissue in seconds. Mira saw it coming and activated her personal shield, but Ethan could see the shield generator overloading before she could. He sprinted across the open chamber floor, ignoring the security drones that tracked his movement, ignoring the shouts from the counselors, ignoring everything except the mathematics of interception. His hand found a piece of debris from Vrya's shattered pod, a curved fragment of crystalline alloy about the size of a dinner plate. Not much of a weapon, but it would have to do. Ethan threw the fragment with perfect rotational force, sending it spinning like a discus through the air. It struck the assassination drone's propulsion system just as the molecular razor cloud deployed, disrupting the targeting sequence. The razors scattered harmlessly against the chamber walls, embedding themselves in metal and stone but missing Mira entirely. The Valesian stared at him with wide, shocked eyes, her bioluminescence flickering in patterns Ethan couldn't interpret. "Behind you," she screamed. Ethan dropped and rolled as a third assassination drone dove at him from above, its manipulator arms extending with surgical blades designed to pierce vital organs. He came up inside its reach, his hands closing around the drone's chassis with surprising gentleness. To the observers, it looked like he was grappling with it. In reality, he was feeling for the control module, the central processing unit that coordinated its actions. Found it. He squeezed, and the drone died with a sad electronic whine. The security systems were catching up now, their targeting protocols adapting to the multiple threats. 2 of the assassination drones went down in a concentrated barrage of plasma fire. The 4th, the one Ethan had identified hiding near Counselor Thane's pod, self-destructed rather than be captured, taking a chunk of the gallery railing with it. Silence fell across the chamber, broken only by the crackling of damaged electronics and the heavy breathing of the assembled counselors. Ethan stood in the center of the floor, pieces of shattered drones scattered around his feet, his prison uniform torn and smoking from near misses. His hands trembled slightly as the adrenaline began to ebb, the predator mode starting to release its grip on his consciousness. He felt suddenly exhausted, hollowed out, as if he'd burned through a week's worth of energy in the span of 60 seconds. Myra's voice crackled through the room's communication system, making all 3 of them jump. And how exactly do we do that when half the council doesn't trust the human, and the other half is currently under siege from false flag operations? Your plan assumes a functional political system, Vra. We don't have that anymore. The hologram shifted to show Myra's face, her bioluminescence pulsing with barely controlled anxiety. She had established a secure communication link from her sanctuary deep in Valesian space. Then we create trust, Ethan said. We give them something they can't deny. Evidence. Truth. And me. All 3 alien faces turned toward him with expressions that ranged from confusion to concern. Explain, Vra commanded. Ethan stood, pacing the small room as he organized his thoughts. The galaxy fears humans because they don't understand us. They know the stories, the violence, the wars, the destructive capacity. But they don't know why. They don't understand that everything we did, everything we are, comes from a place of desperate survival. Earth made us into predators because anything less than a predator died. Our predator mode isn't a weapon we created. It's a scar that evolution carved into our DNA. He turned to face them directly. But that same adaptation is what let me save your lives today. The pattern recognition, the threat assessment, the ability to act decisively in crisis situations, these are the tools that kept humanity alive through ice ages and meteor impacts and 1,000 other apocalypses. The galaxy needs to see that distinction. They need to understand that being a predator doesn't mean being a monster. You want to testify publicly, Torvin said, understanding dawning in her eyes. Put yourself on display to prove humans aren't the threat the conspirators claim. More than that, Ethan said. I want to demonstrate what predator mode actually is. Under controlled conditions, with observers from every major species, I want to show them that human capabilities can be understood, can be predicted, can be worked with rather than feared. Take away the mystery, and you take away the power of the conspirators' rhetoric. Myra's image flickered with what Ethan had learned to recognize as profound doubt. You're asking us to deliberately trigger your predator response. To recreate the exact scenario that has terrified the galaxy for centuries. You understand how catastrophically that could backfire. I do, Ethan admitted. But I also understand that we're out of good options. The conspiracy is already in motion. Ships are moving, borders are being redrawn, power is being seized. We need something dramatic enough to stop that momentum. We need to force the galaxy to question everything they thought they knew about humans. Even if it's dangerous. Even if it's terrifying. Especially if it's terrifying. Vra clicked his mandibles in a pattern that Ethan's implant translated as grim humor. You would volunteer to become a spectacle. To let yourself be studied like a specimen. If it saves lives and stops a war, yes, Ethan said simply. Besides, I've been a specimen since you captured me. At least this way, I get to control the narrative. The three council members exchanged glances that transcended species barriers. Ethan could see them weighing the risks, calculating the political implications, considering the 1,000 ways this plan could go catastrophically wrong. Finally, Fra spoke. There would have to be conditions. Safety protocols. Multiple layers of containment. And most critically, transparency. Every species, every faction, every interested party would need access to the demonstration. We cannot give the conspirators any opportunity to claim manipulation or deception. Agreed, Ethan said. And you would need to tell us everything, Torvin added. Every aspect of this predator mode. Its triggers, its limitations, its duration. We would need complete understanding to make this work safely. As much as I understand it myself, Ethan promised. Which honestly isn't much. I've only experienced it twice in my life, once during the patrol ship incident, and once in your chamber. I can tell you what it feels like, but I can't tell you exactly how it works. Human scientists were still studying it when the species collapsed. Myra's bioluminescence pulsed with a pattern that might have been resignation. This is insane. We're going to put the fate of galactic stability on the shoulders of the last human and his barely understood genetic quirk. We're going to put it on the truth, Fra corrected. And on the courage of someone who saved our lives when he had every reason to let us die. That's more than most species have offered each other in recent memory. Over the next 18 hours, they built the demonstration. A secure facility on the neutral station of Concordia Prime, with transparent walls that allowed viewing from every angle. Representatives from 47 species confirmed attendance, while another 100 requested remote viewing access. The conspirators tried to block it, tried to use their newly seized authority to shut down the broadcast, but Vra and his allies had spent decades building political coalitions for exactly this kind of emergency. The galaxy would watch. The question was whether they would understand what they saw. Ethan stood in the center of the demonstration chamber, monitoring equipment attached to his temples, chest, and wrists. Outside the transparent walls, thousands of beings from across known space waited with expressions ranging from morbid curiosity to outright hostility. He could see Vra, Mira, Thane, and Orin in the front row of the observation deck, their faces reflecting various degrees of hope and terror. The demonstration would be simple. They had constructed a scenario designed to trigger predator mode, multiple threat vectors, innocent beings in danger, impossible timing. Combat drones programmed to operate at lethal capacity but equipped with neural disruptors that would stop short of actually killing. It was as safe as they could make something inherently dangerous. Vra's voice came through the chamber speakers. Ethan Reed, you may begin when ready. Ethan closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and thought about Earth. About the home world he had never seen but carried in his DNA. About the evolutionary crucible that had hammered his species into something that could survive anything. About the price his ancestors had paid so that he could stand here, in this moment, representing the entirety of humanity before a galaxy that had written them off as monsters. He opened his eyes. Release the drones, he said. What happened next would change everything.